Hi everyone, it's Stephen Hattisides and welcome to another podcast, How to Deliver Outstanding Events that Create Engagement and Memorable Experiences. I'm very fortunate to have Emily Dwyer, who currently leads the Creative HQ events team in Wellington, New Zealand. It's great to be interviewing someone in New Zealand, although they are from the other side of the world where I spent half my life in the UK. So Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Stephen. I'm always excited to talk about events.
Yeah, and look, it looks like you've done a lot. You've been innovating, and that's what it's all about. So tell us a little bit about your background and where it sort of already started. Where did the interest come from in doing events?
Yeah, cool. So, I've been interested in creating experiences for as long as I can remember. So, I was a kid at school that was planning the birthday parties and, doing the charity bake sales. And, I wasn't naturally kind of studious, but I was always very creative. And so kind of when I got to college, I was the lead party planner, so to speak, planning all the parties and kind of like, I wonder how I can actually make money from this and do this, kind of for a living. So actually studied event management at university and kind of worked in events throughout my time at university. And I can't imagine going into or doing anything else. I just loved it. I was always fascinated by the memories that people can create from attending experiences and being a part of experiences. And so I was very fascinated by human behavior at events. And so I did a bit of psychology alongside my events degree. And just would love just watching people engage at events and how they interact and how they kind of like took on the experience. So kind of after uni, I kind of went into quite a few different sectors within events, so mostly music festivals in the UK, kind of moved around positions doing production and stage management and all that kind of stuff. Musicians were by far the most difficult people I've ever had to work with, so but it was a challenge. And then I kind of moved into the more charity space, doing a lot of work for different charity organisations, managing a lot of fun runs and marathons and that kind of thing. And then pretty soon after kind of finishing university, I moved to Australia and was doing kind of more brand marketing focused events there, which was kind of a different kettle of fish altogether. And then alongside that kind of did my own kind of stuff working for Oxfam and doing kind of female empowerment conferences that I kind of set up myself. And then kind of that didn't bring in the income too much. So I moved into BNZ when I moved to New Zealand. And kind of my career took a little bit of a different path, but because I was kind of mostly managing the growth of BNZ Digital's, employee experience. So it was still in that experience space, but more focusing on the experience of bringing people on board to the business and the experience within the team. And within that was a lot of events as well. But that kind of like, I was there for kind of about 5 years. And was looking for a new challenge when the spot came up at Creative HQ. And I think when I left BNZ, I was kind of in a space where I really wanted to create events for impact, rather than just an event for people to have drinks at or eat free food, or, it was more like, how can I create experiences that are actually going to impact people's livelihoods and the environment that we work in and live in. So Creative HQ really provided that option, and I've been at Creative HQ going on 4 years now, and kind of in terms of what we manage there is innovation events. We work with startups, we work with community, and so it's a really broad spectrum of really cool stuff that we do in that space.
And I see that you're one of your roles as festival director of the Mindset of Design Festival. That sounds pretty interesting. What's that all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of got landed on my plate maybe 6 weeks after joining Creative HQ. It's a fast-paced place, is Creative HQ, but it's one of the reasons why I really love the place, because you're kind of just given a meaty challenge and asked to run with it. But it kind of developed out of this concept, obviously we run an event called Tech Week in New Zealand, and so what kind of our CEO at the time was interested in looking at is there was so much focus on tech for solving problems. How do we look at kind of going back to humans solving problems and through human-centered design? So we come up with this concept of running kind of like a parallel event to Tech Week, which was going to be Mindset of Design. So it started really loose in that first year. We've actually been running it going on 4 years this year, but unfortunately with the recent alert level changes, we had to postpone this year's event. But essentially, it's a festival of creativity. What we really kind of focus on is curating content that allows people to think outside the box, to explore different ways of tackling problems, and to really be, I guess, daring in their approaches to tackling problems. And so in the past 3 years, it's kind of been a build your own adventure kind of festival where we'd have kind of a week-long series of keynotes, workshops, masterclasses, panels, and they were kind of on all different topics in the design thinking space. It was so broad. We had some really kind of cool speakers and cool topics. And then this year we kind of transitioned into a typically more 2-day conference kind of approach with much more tailored, curated content as we've grown. We were just getting so much interest for people wanting to speak at it that we had to kind of rein it into 2 days a little bit and add kind of more design to the actual festival.
How does it work with? I mean, how does it work with events just getting so large and you get more interest? Because I suppose for smaller events you can be a lot more interactive and there's more time to sort of do sort of group learnings. When you start expanding it out, do you lose some of that intimacy and you know the quality of those events, or can you still achieve that, but you need to design it in a different way?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's benefits to both, really. I think the last 3 years we've really been lucky in that we've had those little intimate sessions where people could really get to know the speakers and get to know each other. But I think, what we really did with what was going to be this year's festival is we spent so much time looking into the experience design of the festival to still create those intimate moments, those water cooler chats, opportunities to connect with the speakers. So the way we designed the program was not so that it was going to be so massive that it felt really, impersonal in a way, and ways for people, tracks for people to connect with the speakers and connect with each other in smaller, more intimate groups. And I guess one challenge we've kind of looked at this year, given that we were going to be in one space for 2 days rather than across kind of multiple venues over a week, was we've really looked into accessibility as something that we wanted to focus on. And we're not just talking kind of physical accessibility, but different learning styles. People auditory or visual, or like to actually get stuck in and do stuff. So we'd kind of planned activities around that. We'd kind of looked at the people that want to attend these kind of events but find it really daunting by going by themselves. So how could we allow people that were maybe a little bit more introverted to connect with people and connect with the speakers and still get value out of the event? Because it can be daunting, going to a massive conference by yourself. I think that was one thing we looked at this year, is that previous years people could just attend one of the sessions and there might have been like 20-30 people there, but going into a room where there was going to be 700 people is a different story altogether. So we really kind of pulled it back and looked at those intimacies around how people were going to experience a larger scale version of the event.
Do you think that now with we've had the pandemic and there's a lot of changes that people have had to do, obviously digital, which we'll come on to a little bit later, but in terms of, do you think people feel more comfortable in smaller events, or do you think it doesn't really matter, and that you're still seeing you'll still see good numbers and large gatherings coming back?
I think there's been a real shift. Obviously, COVID, a massive responsibility for that. But I think definitely right now, people are definitely a little bit more reserved and reluctant to attend larger scale events. I've got a lot of friends who are really social that actually just don't want to be around lots of people right now. And so that's kind of where I take my cues when I'm planning events, is I kind of, do my own little market research and see what's happening in my circles. But I think initially, previous to, COVID kind of coming about, there was kind of a variety, and it comes back to that, how people interact, right? It was, you've got your people that actually get much more value being in those smaller, campfire conversations where they can have kind of one-to-one conversations with people. But you've got the other side of things where people will attend as many conferences as they can in a year because they just love the buzz of being in a large scale event with lots of people around them and lots of different kind of interactions and ways of engaging. And that's one of the reasons I got into events, because there's nothing better than getting onto an event side and seeing crowds of people enjoying something you've created, right? So I think there's a real mix. But I definitely think there's been a shift, since COVID came about, where people actually are like, well, I can experience things differently now. I can experience things at home without actually leaving my house. I think it's actually changed how we engage as a society, to be honest. But yeah.
And I suppose what's your experience? We've seen in 2020 big transition to just virtual, and I think every events organizer had that big question to ask themselves: that am I going to refund all of the vendors, everyone's ticket money, or am I going to try and work with this virtually? And I suppose those events that actually had dipped their toe a little bit earlier in 2018 and 19, where it was very scarce, were able to make much more success of it, because I saw around the world events being done really badly, and a lot of some of the big events companies tried to throw together some software that just gave everyone a bad experience, a bad taste of what virtual can really bring to an event. But also the transition now into hybrid events is, there is a place for virtual and digital, I believe, but it's the in-person. It's not to replace it. It's really to maximize the scalability, the engagement, which can be quite different from in-person to virtual. So I suppose, how did you, obviously you guys have survived, through the last couple of years. So how did you pivot, and how far did you pivot into virtual hybrid solutions?
Yeah, no, it's been a really interesting time the past few years. I mean, Creative HQ is a global company. We've done a lot of work internationally, and so when COVID hit, we kind of pivoted straight away. We had to keep going, and as leaders in innovation in New Zealand, we kind of had to be at the forefront of leading that change. And so we pivoted pretty quickly in figuring out how we can still deliver things to our international clients and online, and still connect with our community, which is a massive part of the work we do. And actually, that connection piece is still and was really huge back then. And so our first, pivot was that we within kind of 2 weeks of us all going into lockdown, myself and some colleagues and people around New Zealand kind of came together, and we designed essentially a hackathon called Hack the Crisis, which we ended up having about 1,000 people online for a 48-hour challenge, which was just insane because, it was really new. We were the first people to be doing it in New Zealand. There was similar events around the world, people doing it, but we were the first one in New Zealand, and the engagement was insane. It was, it was still fresh for people. People didn't have that kind of Zoom fatigue and that being online. And so, I really, one thing we are very good at Creative HQ is making things happen quickly. We make a plan and we execute it, and we learn from it and we adapt it. And so that was kind of our first experience of going virtual, and it was a really successful it was a really successful event, and we connected all those people in a time that was really difficult. And since then, we've kind of really adapted. We've tried different things. We've tried different platforms. And I guess one thing that we've learned is that, definitely the last year, people are really suffering with that Zoom fatigue, and getting people to come to virtual events is actually quite challenging. And so, one thing that we looked into, or essentially me and my team, is how do you create that physical experience but virtually? And so we kind of really tap into that experience design side of things. And for me, when I plan an event, I tap into the basic stuff like the senses, sight, sound, smell, all those things. So how do you recreate that online? So we kind of built our virtual events with that in mind. And so we tried lots of different things. We tried online DJs as icebreakers. We tried different tools of engagement. But I think one thing that's come quite clear out of managing hybrid and virtual events is keeping things quite simple sometimes. It can be really overwhelming, or it was, at the start of 2020, to get people to go onto a different platform and get used to seeing their face online and other people looking at their face online. And so keeping things really simple, communicating really clearly. So we in our comms, when we've got a virtual event, we do a step-by-step of what people can expect at each stage of getting online. And we always have a support team on our virtual events for anyone that might be struggling. And I think another key thing is that engagement piece, right? Like keeping people online is really crucial to keep those numbers up and keep people kind of actually staying right till the end of the event. And so we find like putting little hooks in, so actually not putting the the most exciting content up front, putting it towards the end. And so there's just little tricks and stuff that we've actually and we're still learning, right? We're still trying to figure out how we keep people from dropping off from virtual events and keep people engaged during a time where everyone's just sick of being on Zoom, so
exactly. No, I get it. Look, I think where it was challenging for people in 2020 was that they were trying to translate and emulate that exact experience that they had in person online, and that wasn't anyone's fault. It was just the lack of knowledge and understanding of what you could do virtually. And a lot of the time, when we're speaking, with our clients that are running events or event planners, we tell them anything is possible. It's just done in a different way. And it's not necessarily to say it's better or less effective. It's just done in a different way. And I think, which you've experienced, is when you're wanting to run an event, you really do have to think outside the box. And you think, what is my outcome and how am I going to take those steps to get there? And you can definitely work out a way to do that virtually. It's just, as a team together, need to come up with some pretty cool constructive ideas. And I think, there are a lot of technologies and platforms out there, and I think it's important to find one that's very versatile and flexible, that you can change colors, you can, change the look and feel of something so you can simulate that sort of real life experience, or even, having a team that's possibly local, or an account manager that you feel comfortable with, that you can pick up the phone or drop them an email and you're going to get an immediate response. I think the biggest concern with events managers, from what I've heard over the last sort of couple of years, is that uncertainty and lack of confidence that, they're going to damage their relationship with their clients because of the reliability of technology. And as you know, we can't control the internet speeds of individuals around the world. So, we had our own massive event. We started planning out in 2017, and, we wanted to test out our software. So we put together this huge event, big global conference, and we ended up getting, 5,000 attendees, 100 vendors. It was in 4 languages, and we had 32 countries attend. And we had no idea how someone would interact on a virtual space, and neither did they. So we sort of had to create a roadmap that made sense. But again, I think internet speeds came into a little bit, but to be honest with you, I think 99% we were all able to watch the content. I think, pre-recorded content, and sometimes with a semi-live approach where, it feels like a conference, but it takes away a lot of that uncertainty of the internet speed. So we always used to say an 80-20 rule, with 80%, pre-recorded with a live feel to it, and 20% sort of live. But I do see now a lot are doing the hybrid, where there's a lot more of that live part. I think some of the other things, isn't it, where I sort of resonate with what you say about how do you keep people engaged, and I think it is important that you do have things in and around your event. And I think it's really good with some of the platforms that you can have lots of different experience rooms throughout the event. The gamification's always worked extremely well for us. So, getting people to go to the exhibition hall, to meet the partners, listen to their presentations, they get points and they win prizes. But it's similar to a physical environment. I mean, I've been to hundreds of in-person events in the medical space, and, they still had the problem of getting doctors to look at go into the exhibition halls, because they're wanting to catch up with their friends, and they're wanting to go out for dinners and watch content. They don't really want to go into the exhibition halls so much. So we've got that problem, haven't we, in an in-person and virtual environment. And I think more and more it's like, how can we use both to create a more effective experience, but then also give access. We look at the opportunity of giving access to people outside our sort of region. So for our goal on that big medical conference was to give third world countries, doctors in those countries, access to some of the best speakers in the world for $100 versus then going to Paris and Monaco and having all the expense and travel and hotels, etc. So no, I think it sounds like you've done extremely well with that. What's the DevOps conference that you did? I think that was quite innovative. That was the first one that you had created for that industry.
Yeah, and so I was kind of, that kind of came off my work at BNZ actually, because we were doing kind of smaller scale kind of hackathons with the BNZ Digital team as it was kind of growing. And we kind of run these smaller scale in-house hackathons just with the team. And people found real value in them. And actually one of our developers at the time was kind of, connected with the wider developer community in New Zealand. And so I kind of got approached to help this group of people because they were all techies, they were all developers. I knew nothing about developing, but I knew the event side of things. So we kind of were this mishmash of people creating this, New Zealand's first DevOps conference, essentially. And so, it's going back maybe, 7 years or something, the first one we did now. I think it kind of lasted maybe five conferences, and it just got bigger and bigger. But essentially that was I guess a physical version of the Hack the Crisis that I was talking about. It was obviously pre-pandemic, and it was a 48-hour conference of bringing people in the DevOps space from around New Zealand to share and connect and talk about latest research and latest trends. And it was all very nerdy. I had no idea what a lot of people were talking about, to be honest, but I knew the event stuff, so I could bring that. They wanted it to be they didn't want it to be this dry conference, right? So they wanted someone to bring that kind of trendy, kind of cool experience through and make DevOps cool, essentially. And so there was a lot of, in a lot of the experience design, there was a lot of gamify that we did within the experience design, and a lot of kind of like breakout sessions and campfire, sessions, just to allow people to kind of, split off from the kind of wider group. But yeah, it kind of did quite well, and we kind of ran it for 5 years, and it grew steadily. We started at maybe like 150 people, and I think, when it got to the 5th year, we were kind of at the more kind of like 2,000 people level, and it's, it was, I guess it came from the fact that there was a real need for it in New Zealand. Like, people were having to travel overseas to go to DevOps conferences, and it's like, well, why can't we just actually do this in New Zealand? There's a market for it. And so, but then after that 5 years, the kind of team kind of moved on to different things, and everyone kind of had different I guess kind of challenges in their other areas of the work. So but hopefully it'll pick back up at some point again in the future once things calm down again. But it was a really cool event to be a part of.
And so, being in events, I mean, you have to be pretty strong-willed. There's a personality, and you got to be a people's person. You've got to be really resilient to change, last minute sort of pressure. So for people that are wanting to sort of maybe not just get into events, but like for yourself, you're considering running a new event, what sort of goes through your mind? I mean, is it that, we're going to create this new event, are people going to find it interesting? Are people going to book in? Do you find with events, and does it change over time, where people book their tickets at the last minute, or do you find people are booking their tickets well in advance?
I think it depends on the type of event. So I think in the instance of, Kings of Leon are coming to Auckland, and, they're not coming till 2023 or whatever, I think, stuff like that, people book in advance because they know the tickets are going to sell out, right? So, but I think in my industry, especially in Creative HQ, what I found, and working in events in New Zealand in general, I think it's kind of a different culture here, in that people do generally tend to wait till the last minute to sign up, which comes with its challenges as well, right? When you're ordering catering and size of venue and all those kind of things, you kind of, have to kind of mind read and predict what's going to happen, really, and hope for the best. But yeah, I often find, and I think the behaviour's definitely changed since the pandemic started, is people, they just want to keep their options open, I think. And, we live in a world where people have got so much choice now, and they've got the events market is almost saturated because there's so much stuff that people can do. And I think people just generally like to, see how they feel on the day, or, if something better comes along, they don't want to have commit to something that they now have to go to. And so that's definitely one thing that I find really challenging in events is that kind of like people just deciding kind of last minute. But I'm also guilty of it, to be honest. I have to check myself now when I'm about to like click RSV to an event. I'm like, am I actually going to go to this thing? So,
are you a millennial? Are you classified?
Yes, I know. And we've got so much choice for like, what's the cool thing to do? It might be cool this week, but not next week. So, I do find that it is quite a last minute thing these days, anyway.
Oh, that's amazing. And so, just lastly, I mean, what's coming up for you guys? What is there anything that the audience would find interesting? Maybe possibly attending physically or virtually.
Yeah, I mean, so we're currently in the process of redesigning Mindset of Design for this year. Obviously, we were supposed to be running our 2-day festival next week. So we're going to have a little in-person session for my team to celebrate that it was going to happen. But yeah, we're currently in the process of redesigning that, hopefully to get that to get some version of it by the end of May. So, keep a lookout on the Mindset of Design website for news for that coming up. We've got this amazing program of these incredible speakers. We've got about 32 speakers, all coming from different walks of life, talking about different challenges within design. And it's not just for designers. The one thing that we say about mod is that we really want to make it accessible in that, you know, we design kind of in our lives every day, to our commute to work, to what we're having for dinner. And we want to make design more accessible to people, because actually some of the content that comes out of mindset of design is so valuable to everyone. We kind of make it so it's not just very like heavily design focused and you've got to be a designer to attend. So we've got that coming up in May. We also run a community event series at Creative HQ, which kind of covers stuff from innovation to entrepreneurship to creativity. We run a session usually once a week. And we have some really cool, diverse speakers that come and join us for that. We're just, and you know, with the red alert level, we're just kind of constantly iterating at the minute of how we can deliver things and connect with the community still, and still provide experiences for, you know, our ecosystem essentially.
That's super exciting. No, look, you guys sound like you're doing really, really well, you know, in these slightly difficult and very inflexible times in New Zealand. And look, I think it does open up a lot of opportunities, though. It's made the world a lot smaller, hasn't it? Where we can attract more attendees, more interest from attendees all over the world. We can get speakers, we can get other sponsors that, you know, companies that want to enter in New Zealand, or they want to attract good talent from New Zealand into other markets. I think, you know, there are a lot of opportunities, and it sounds like you're really sort of capitalizing on that. So, Emily, it's been an absolute pleasure having this interview. You're just a wealth of knowledge, and, you know, I'm sure everyone listening is going to find a lot of those really valuable, those nuggets that you gave. So I thank you so much, and I'd love to do an interview with you later on in the year. I just think and see how things have been going.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much for having me on, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.